welcome back to my channel. My name is Sim Kern. My pronouns are they, them. And today I'm going to be kicking off the Palestine Reading Challenge, which I have developed with Nicole Moon, who's another booktuber. Neither of us are Palestinian. I looked online to see if there was any kind of, Palestinian-focused reading challenge and didn't find anything. In fact, I found very few people who've even mentioned Palestine at all on BookTube in the last few weeks. And I reached out to some of those people. I also asked on Twitter if anyone was interested in reading Palestinian literature as a way of learning about and supporting Palestinian culture right now. And Nicole's the person who got back to me. We would love for more booktubers to join, especially if there are any Palestinian or Muslim or Arabic booktubers who would love to join or even take this over. That's totally cool. We don't want to step on anyone's toes with this. It's more about I think me realizing personally that I've read several books about Palestine, but I had never read a book by a Palestinian author. And that's part of the oppression of the apartheid, right? Is there's a cultural embargo on Palestinian voices. And in fact, I was really moved this week by a video that was put out by Haneen Orikat, who is a writer who's been working for a long time to break into the publishing industry and has been told by agents and publishing professionals that her very identity is too political, and that because she is a Palestinian author and not an Arabic author, that she's only allowed to write certain kinds of stories, or even just taking her onto their list would be considered too controversial because people are so scared of doing anything to that could lead Zionists to call them anti-Semitic, and doing anything to support a Palestinian person is viewed that way, unfortunately, by the publishing industry. So we want to change that. I think it's really important that the booktube community, the bookstagram community, we say we're all about diversity and social justice. And it's important for us to come together at this moment when Palestine is being so brutally attacked, and has been for a long time, right? Nothing new. And say that we support these stories, and we want to read these stories, and we want to promote these stories. So, and also just I have a much longer video. If you don't know much about the Palestine, what's going on right now, I have a much longer video that I'll link to what's going on there, and how I, as an American Jew, feel very complicit and very called to speak out as much as I can about what's going on in Palestine. With that, let's talk about what the reading challenge entails. And again, this is just about let's learn more about Palestinian culture. Let's support Palestinian voices, because they do find it so hard to break into the publishing industry in the US and in the diaspora countries. So the first challenge is to read a book by a Palestinian author who lives or lived at some point in Palestine. So you can actually get that perspective of someone who's been there. And then the second challenge is read a book by a Palestinian author who lives in the diaspora. The third challenge is to read a memoir by a Palestinian author. Living Palestinians lived through some really terrible history that happened very recently, and reading their memoirs is a great way to learn that history, which we all need to be aware of. The fourth challenge is to read a book by a living Palestinian author. So what we see happening with indigenous people in the US, there is colonialism creates this mythology that these peoples were historical or are no longer living, or colonialism just wants to hide the existence of living indigenous people, right? And so reading something very contemporary by a living Palestinian author, I think is a great challenge. Read a nonfiction book about Palestine. So if you're like me and you really prefer reading fiction, gonna try to get out of your comfort zone and read something a little bit more historical. And I think it would be fine for that challenge also if you read a book by a Palestinian author, or a book about Palestine written by a non-Palestinian author. I have 2 recommendations for that I'll share later. Those were the first books I read about Palestine, and really opened my eyes to the lies and hypocrisy of the Zionism that I had been raised to believe. The next challenge is try to read poetry by a Palestinian poet. In Arabic cultures, poetry is the most highly revered literary art form, or at least that's what I read. I don't usually read poetry, so I'm excited to do that challenge. And finally, read a book in another sort of non-traditional genre, so a play, a graphic novel, a children's book, something like that. You do not have to do all these challenges to participate. All you have to do is read any one of those challenges. It's also fine if your books hit multiple different challenges, you know, that totally counts. I'm planning on reading 4 books and a children's book, so 5 total, and I think with those 5 I'm going to hit all of the 7 challenges, because a bunch of them fall for like multiple categories. When I participated in Readathon last year, I really liked the life challenges that went along with it. It's just a way to like more deeply engage in the culture. And because this is such an active social justice issue, like reading books is not enough. Like taking action is actually like way more important. So let's try to do some of these life challenges too. So the first one would be to use your voice, whatever kind of online social media presence you have, to talk about Free Palestine. Use the hashtag Free Palestine, hashtag Save Jerusalem, hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah. Again, there's my video I'll link to other like way better Palestinian voices explaining what's going on and what you can do to help, okay? So that's the first life challenge. The second life challenge is to donate to a charity for Palestinian folks. Be careful that you select a charity that actually does boots on the ground work in Palestine, and not something like, you know, the Red Cross or something where it just goes into a big fund for whatever. So a good one to donate to is the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. They are an organization that have been providing medical care to children who are sick and wounded and need any kind of medical care in Palestine, where unfortunately like the childhood death rate is like very high. And tragically, in this last bombing of Gaza, their clinic was bombed, which is a terrible tragedy. We need to help them rebuild. So I would encourage you to donate to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. Okay, those are the first 2 life challenges. The third one, we're going to kind of broaden our cultural outlook, is to watch a Palestinian film. There's a renaissance of Palestinian film that's been going on the last couple decades, and I will link to a list of Palestinian films you can watch for free online in the description. The next life challenge is to get into some Palestinian music. Especially there's the interest in film, there's like a really big Palestinian hip hop scene, and it's incredible. I think you've got the combination of like poetry and like the solidarity between Palestinian and like Black American communities, which if you want to read about that, there's a great book called Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. It's about the connections between Ferguson and Palestine and a long history of international solidarity between Black power and Palestinian, and incidentally Native American indigenous communities in resisting oppression and colonialism. So yeah, listen to some Palestinian music. I've just found from like getting started with this incredible hip hop group called DAM. They have videos with their lyrics translated online, and they're like so insightful and well done and funny, even though they're like expressing these like really brutal truths. Every song is a jam too. Like every song is a jam. I downloaded their most recent album and like I haven't been able to stop listening to it. So definitely check them out. I'll link to them below as well. Eat some Palestinian food. A great way to do this that I'm planning to do, I'm probably going to do both ways. So the first way that's really great to do is if you have a Palestinian restaurant near you in your community, go eat there, go support them. Like that's supporting the diaspora Palestinian community in a really meaningful way, and you're going to get to eat some delicious food that maybe you've never had before. And the other thing you can do if you don't have a Palestinian restaurant near you, or if you just love to cook like me, is to cook a Palestinian dish. I've been looking at recipes online. Obviously, like I'm more familiar with like Israeli Jewish food that I've cooked before, and a lot of that was stolen from Palestinian cuisine, like most things. So I'm excited to kind of learn more about like the origins of that food and cook actually Palestinian dishes. So those are the challenges. You definitely don't have to do everything. Like just making some attempt to promote Palestinian literature is really great. So why don't I tell you now about the books that I've selected to read. Oh, and I didn't tell you the dates. We're kind of doing this spur of the moment, and we want people to have time to like look into it and get the books they want to read and have time to read them before we discuss. So me and Nicole Moon, we're going to be doing this challenge until July 18th. And we're going to have a live show on July 18th where we just get together and talk about what we read and what we ate and saw and like how this experience was for us. And again, we would love for more booktubers to join us. So please, if you are a booktuber and you are interested in this challenge, you want to participate, contact me. You can DM me on Twitter or Instagram, and you can also find my email address on my website, and just contact me and say like, hey, I'm a booktuber, I want to be part of the live show. We'll add you in. So that will be July 18th, and we'll be talking about what we read. But if you're watching this video after that, like, I hope this just is a challenge for this whole year and future years. Like, let's all just keep supporting Palestinian literature and don't feel like there's a time limit or an expiration date on like when this challenge can go to. All right. So let me tell you about the books that I'm going to read. The first one, which I've already gotten started on, is Mahmoud Darwish's Mural, translated by Rima Hamami and John Berger. And this is my poetry pick. It's also Mahmoud Darwish was born and lived for a short time in Palestine before the Nakba of 48, so before the Israeli military took over the country. And he was then eventually like exiled and lived in America. I was actually really touched reading his biography that he died just a few years before I gave birth to my daughter in the same hospital. And I don't know, it just made me feel this connection. Like, here he was this great literary giant, and he died in exile at this hospital here where I gave birth to my baby. I don't know, it really struck me. So this is 2 epic poems are included in this small little book, and I'm excited to read this one. The next book that I got is Salt Houses by Hala Alian. This one will also satisfy diaspora Palestinian author and living Palestinian author. This is a pretty contemporary novel. It's a multi-generational novel about a family that is originally has to flee Palestine during the Six-Day War of 1967, and then they again there's a second generational story that I gather takes place. They move to Kuwait, and then when Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait in the 90s, they have to flee again, and then the third generation is like scattered in the diaspora throughout the world. I love intergenerational family stories. This thing has incredible reviews, and I'm very excited to read Salt Houses. The next book is my nonfiction pick, and it brings together my interest in like climate change and climate fiction, because I'm a climate fiction writer, and Palestine. And I'm always saying, and it's so important to remember, especially as like white climate people, that we center the voices of indigenous people in the climate movement, and like indigenous liberation is always tied to climate justice and actually addressing climate change. So this book, Palestinian Walks, by Raja Shahade, is it takes place over 6 walks he takes in his beloved Palestinian countryside. I think it's near Ramallah. And over time, the landscape is marred and ruined, and the ecosystem is changing because of Israeli settlement and the Israeli occupation. And so it's exploring both like the human and sociological and ecological toll of settler colonialism. So I'm very interested to read Palestinian Walks, Forays into a Vanishing Landscape. The last novel I'm going to read is You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. I'm not great at Palestinian names. I'll have to get better and watch more videos and learn how to pronounce all these names correctly before the live show. So this one's a very contemporary, and it's also a queer Palestinian novel, which I think is super cool. So it's about a Palestinian young woman living in the diaspora, and she comes out as lesbian to her mother, who tells her you exist too much, told in vignettes that flash between the US and the Middle East, from New York to Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine. It traces her protagonist's progress from blushing teen to sought-after DJ and aspiring writer. So kind of a queer coming-of-age story. I'm really excited to read this one to support Palestinian American writers. I think like that's so important. Writing in the USA now, and I'm really excited to read this one. I hope some of y'all will join me in reading it. The last book is the one I'm going to do for the non-traditional genre challenge, and that is a children's book that I've gotten for my daughter called, let me get the title right. It's like Baba, What Does My Name Mean? A Journey to Palestine. So this, it looks like the illustrations in this book are very joyful. It is like a joyful celebration of Palestinian culture. So I don't think it gets too much into the darker history, but it does include a bit of that like at the end, but it's mostly just like very joyfully celebrating Palestinian culture. And I'm really excited to get that. It says it's appropriate for ages 4 to 7. So my daughter's about to turn 4. I'm sure that it will be perfect for her. So those are my book challenges. I'm excited to patronize a Palestinian restaurant that I found near me. I'm excited to keep finding more amazing Palestinian hip hop to listen to. And I'm already like jamming to Dom all the time. And to do the film watching challenges. Oh my God, I forgot to share the last part of the challenge, which is like the hardest and most, like, well, maybe not most important, but there's one more challenge that I want to give you, especially if you're Jewish like me. And that challenge is to actually talk to friends or family members you know who are Zionists and tell them why you support a free Palestine. And this is very hard to do. And this is the first time in my life I have ever had the courage to do it. And some of those conversations have immediately like just hit an impasse and been shut down. And another conversation with a very beloved, longtime family friend of mine, we were able to go back and forth a couple times. And then it was like, we really care about this relationship. We're gonna put a pause on this. But don't expect these conversations to immediately resolve in like changing someone's mind, because I think totally overhauling your whole worldview and accepting that like things you thought were true and good are actually evil is like a lot, and it takes time. But just trying to have those conversations can plant seeds, and it will worry at them, and maybe over time something comes from it. So even if you try to have those conversations and they wind up being dead ends, it's still important to try. So that would be the last challenge that I would encourage everybody to do. And other than that, I hope that some of y'all will join me. If you are a booktuber and you want to be involved, please contact me. And you can find my email on my website. Free Palestine, save Sheikh Jarrah, save Jerusalem. Bye.